marimba is an instrument with a long and rich history. Variations of what we today call the marimba have existed for thousands of years and can be found in Indonesia, Africa, Southern Europe, and Central America. However, the marimba's presence within art music is a relatively novel phenomenon. It wasn't until the 1960s that the marimba transformed from an instrument used in the West, mainly for transcriptions and popular music, into an instrument with its own voice and its own repertoire within classical music. This transformation is largely due to the work and vision of one woman, Keiko Abe. By commissioning and composing works, and by working with instrument manufacturers to develop and enhance the instrument, Abe transformed the marimba into an instrument with its own repertoire and place in the canon of art music today. How did one woman accomplish so much to enhance her instrument? To answer this question, we spoke to Rebecca Kite, percussionist and author of the book Keiko Abe, A Virtuosic Life. Kite's research has documented Abe's remarkable contributions to the field of marimba performance. She reminds us first that Abe's early career, not as a concert soloist, but as a performer of popular music, set the stage for what was to come.
Keiko was a pop artist in Japan and a studio musician for about 6 or 7 years when she started playing in the studios when she was in college. And she was such a great musician and sight reader, and she could improvise that, of course, the conductors and composers wanted her on all of their jobs because she made their life easy. So she was immersed in doing other people's music and doing lots of pop tunes. She was hired to do with her Rebecca Trio. They made 11 albums of basically pop music, arrangements, transcriptions with a little chamber orchestra, the kind of things that you would hear in the US in the early 1960s, similar kinds of arrangements. She became a pop star and a TV celebrity doing that. And after she did that for a while, she got tired of just doing pop music. Of course, in the movie and film scores and orchestra playing she did also, she played a lot of serious contemporary music that the same composers wrote, and the same composers worked in the studios that were doing serious music as well. They did kind of both sides of the fence. It wasn't, oh, I'm a film composer or I'm a serious classical composer. Kind of, they weren't all in. They just did. The composers did every style of music, and she, as a result of that work, she got familiar with many different great composers in Japan, great composers in Tokyo, their writing style and their aesthetic and how much they used percussion and if they used the marimba. So she got to know their musical personalities. So she met a lot of the composers that she later on commissioned in her work in the studios and in orchestra performances in early 1960s.
Abe's repertoire up to this point had included popular and folk tunes, light classical melodies, and American xylophone solos. There were few serious works written specifically for the marimba with its distinctive sound. Abe sought to change this by fostering a repertoire of serious works for the marimba, and in this early part of her career, she met the composers who would help her to change the status of her instrument.
She decided to get more classical music for marimba, more serious music. They had a little more musical depth, maybe more different kinds of harmony and maybe a little more different kinds of intent behind it, maybe longer, more bigger compositions. So she decided to do this concert. The most important one was in 1968, was the first concert of marimba compositions written specifically for the marimba. It was the first full-length concert like that in the world, anywhere.
The program of this recital consisted entirely of works commissioned by Abe, and these compositions were some of the first to explore the sound qualities and techniques that are unique to the marimba.
So we didn't really have much in the way of marimba repertoire, muster etudes, really thin, things were really thin there. The marimba had been really popular for a long time and had, after World War II, pretty much kind of gone down as electric guitars and drums and rock and roll came up, and just wasn't much happening. But in Japan, there was a lot happening. And that concert really started what I call the modern marimba, the modern era of marimba playing, which is what you all know about and what you played.
Abe's 1968 recital would ensure a place for the marimba in the canon of art music.
What happened is that Keiko, uh, when she performs, she is 1000% inhabits the music that she plays. And by that I mean she's completely focused on the music and the interpretation and just the music sounding as good as she can make it sound. And of course, she's got a really great musical imagination. She's a musical genius. And um, so when she's playing something and really all in on it, it's just incredible artistry, highest top quality artistry of anybody in the world. And so she was approaching these new contemporary pieces with that kind of commitment, that kind of artistic commitment. And that's one aspect of her music and her performance that I think has affected everyone who's ever heard her play, at just that taking the performance of a marimba piece to such a high artistic level, because it's so inspiring and amazing. And so the composers who heard her, what she did with her pieces that she wrote, and of course they collaborated during the writing of the pieces. They would visit her house, and she would, with the new next 20 measures or something, and she would play through it and say, well, this sounds good, or this maybe do this might sound better on the instrument. She has just a really great sense of what's going to sound good on the marimba because of its kind of unique harmonics and unique sound. And they were amazed that she could play and bring so much to their music. And it got the critics' attention, it got composers' attention, it got students' attention, it got the audience's attention. And all of a sudden, the marimba is now seen in a totally different light than it was when she was playing on a variety TV show of Japanese folk song, with a cute dress on and the orchestra behind her.
Abe's contributions to the marimba go even beyond developing its repertoire. Through a 16-year partnership with the instrument manufacturing company Yamaha, Abe helped to develop the 5-octave marimba that we know today, and she worked arduously to improve its sound quality across the range of the instrument.
And then other outgrowth, besides of raising that standard and showing the possibility of that artistry on the instrument, the other thing that happened was that Minoru Miki and I think Miyoshi, two of the composers who were at that concert, talked to her after the concert, and they were not happy. They were really happy with her performance, but they thought that the marimba that she used didn't really have the right kind of sound for their music. They felt like it had kind of a ethnic folkloric sound, and the pitch wasn't super clean and clear, and like you couldn't hear like the if you play like a minor second on a piano, you can hear the harmonics clashing with each other. You hear those standing waves, kind of thing, right? And you couldn't hear those things weren't really present in that instrument. And they advised her to try and find a way to get a better quality instrument that would support the music, that would support her own performances, and that they would be happier hearing, so better sound. And she was using a Musser 250 that she had bought, which was a state-of-the-art instrument in 1957 when she bought it. That was like the top marimba in the world. And it went down to a low A, which she really needed. And that's what she played all of her music. That's what she was using then, from when she bought it, when she was in college, to when Yamaha came up with a better instrument for her in the early 70s. So in terms of her influence on the instrument, she decided she would go to Yamaha and ask them if they would build a marimba that was better that had more of the sound that she wanted for her concerts, and the composers would be happier, and would they be interested in doing that? And she talked to the president of Yamaha, and she was a television celebrity back then, so he agreed that they would make a custom make an instrument for her for her to use, and also make it as a commercial something to sell.
Over 16 years, Yamaha developed various prototypes for Abe, first creating a low F instrument, and then finally the 5-octave instrument.
They came up with something and had an instrument and would have Keiko play it. She would play it, and she would say, well, it needs this, I'm kind of making this up, but she would tell them it needs maybe a longer resonant sound. The sound's too short. It stops too soon. And it doesn't have I don't hear a pure pitch on there. I'm not sure, my ear's not sure what the pitch is on that. It's kind of, sounds more like a wood block or something. And then they would go back and fix that problem. And they go back and forth on those things. It took them 16 years. It's kind of amazing. And it's an amazing instrument. And at that point, there was no other company made 5-octave marimbas. In 1985, Yamaha, the YM6000 was the only 5-octave marimba in the world.
The instrument has come a long way from these beginnings. Today, the 5-octave marimba is ubiquitous in classical performance spaces, and it all started with the work of Abe. The works that she commissioned, as well as the many she composed herself, are also rites of passage for percussionists to perform. Abe's contributions are so vast that it's hard to imagine what the instrument's role and repertoire would look like today without her. Lastly, we should not neglect the moving effect that Abe has had on those that have met her or watched her perform. Rebecca Kite, a lifelong friend of Abe, describes the impact that performing with her has had. They first met at the Percussive Art Society's convention in 1981.
Through a mutual friend, I got to meet her at the convention. I got to eat breakfast with her and her English teacher and her traveling companions one day. And so we talked, and that was pretty exciting and scary. And then that was before I heard her perform, but she invited me to come to the sound check for her concert. So I went to the sound check, and I heard her go through her whole program, because they had, there were some microphones. She had this strange, prototype marimba with tunable resonators, and it had this roll-up extension to it to make it into 5 octaves. And so there were 2 technicians from Japan that traveled with her to take care of the instrument. So there was all this interesting things going on. And when I heard her play, it was just, she was amazing. And the repertoire was a lot of really serious contemporary pieces with a couple of her transcriptions, kind of like a encore type thing, kind of quiet sorts of things. And so after I heard her play, I asked her if I could get a lesson with her over the weekend sometime. And I lived in Bloomington, Indiana at that point, and she came down to Bloomington. She was coming down to meet with composers, not the percussion department that wasn't real interested in the marimba at that point, but to meet with composers and to try and encourage them to write music for this instrument. So she told me she was coming down and we could get together when she came down to Bloomington. And what ended up happening is she asked me if I would play with her at the composer's demonstration and to demonstrate how she improvised with her students. And I did know time for marimba, and I'd been practicing it. And I said, sure, it's scary, but yeah, I couldn't pass up an opportunity like that. And I didn't know what would happen, but I knew I could play that piece. And so we rehearsed about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The meeting was at 7, and I had a Deegan Model 40 marimba, 4 octaves, small bars, small sound. And, it was pretty, but it was, no match for the Yamaha 4900 with the extension. And so I played in our rehearsal, I played time for marimba and she played and improvised with me on it like she does with her students all the time. And in I was already one of the more musically expressive marimba players at in Bloomington at that point. Um, in terms of having a wider dynamic range and maybe doing a little more format playing, I played guitar transcriptions. And of course, they're up an octave, on that small instrument. And so I wasn't just like a monotone kind of player, but when she started playing with me, it was like, wow, big sound, large arm movements, and it just like it was just an incredible. And she kind of pulled me along with her, and it's like one of those things where you just like you walk out of the room that's kind of muted and gray, and you're out in this beautiful like jungle garden with all these great colors and possibilities and stuff everywhere, and it's like, oh, it's just like completely changes your view, and you can't go back, you can't go backwards.
Keiko Abe's relationship to the marimba is perhaps best captured by a poem that she wrote entitled Marimba and I. When I was happy, there was the marimba. When I was lonely, there was the marimba. When I was sad or struggling with compromise, there was the marimba. People ask me, isn't it enough to play popular classics? Isn't it enough to play an instrument that is part of the percussion section? But I want to speak the soul of the marimba. I yearn to share all life's feelings and the joyful spirit of music with my marimba. And I believe in the future of the marimba. There are composers, performers, audiences who form a single drop, enter the river, and flow toward the sea of the marimba's future. I want to put my soul into the tree soul, the living wood soul of the marimba, to share all the feelings of life with others, to express the breathtaking soul of music. For the marimba is my soul. The marimba and I are one.